There are many reasons for buying a particular watch: looks, quality, functionality, etc. But one of the least acquisitionally arousing but most important is value for money. We are often want to spend more than we should on telling the time in, let's face it, a worse way. So we want to know that we're getting the absolute maximum value possible for our spend. To save you the hard work, however, I've assembled a list of watches I think provide the best value for money over 6 different price brackets, with a range of styles and types to suit every taste. Or at least most of them. What you get up to in your spare time, there's just no accounting for. I feel truly humbled and blessed to have you here, and maybe you want to feel truly humbled and blessed as well, so why not express that humbly blessedness with a lovely sweater from the link below. There's no point putting together the most affordable category of sub £500 watches without starting off with the best value watch ever made, one that can be purchased, if you shop around, for less than the price of a large double quarter-pounder meal with milkshake. Sure, the Casio MQ-24-7BLL is less salty umami, but it's equally very difficult reading the time off a McDonald's. A double quarter-pounder only reads one time. Time to go on a diet. The MQ-24-7BLL is about as exciting as the name suggests, combining all your favourites like dial, strap, and hands into one complete package from which to read the time hands-free from a wristily vantage point. Is it sexy? As a potato. Is it hot? As a cold potato. If a Rolex gets you chicks, the MQ-24-7BLL gets you in line at the DMV. But check it out, because for what it lacks in Instagram game, it makes up for in practicality. Resistance to knocks, water, a stranger's vomit on the bus, everything. And when I say it's resistant to knocks and water, I mean there's an unspecified amount of those things it will tolerate that will be surprisingly high. You can treat it like a Victorian stepchild and those little hands will keep on sweeping. Why is this resistance unspecified? Because you won't be afraid to test it out, because at the point it eventually becomes overwhelmed, you simply buy another one. I can already feel the comment section exploding out the back end, but you know me, I'm going to make like an ice lolly and stick with it. Although it is a piece of plastic trash and not even fit to get stuck around a turtle's neck, it delivers in value in one particular place that absolutely overwhelmingly makes it one of the biggest bargain buys since that dude let Jesus touch his loaves and fishes. I'm talking MoonSwatch, the if you can't beat them join them approach from the Swatch group to making fakes of the Omega Speedmaster. If you've been living under a moon rock for the last half a century, then you'll know the Speedmaster Moonwatch is basically Omega's most valuable IP, and so getting into it for the price of Nintendo's Switch seems like highway robbery. Remember when highway robbery was just a whimsical term and not a London City Tourist Board warning? The watch is identical in size and shape, although is far less robust, with the consistency of a dry-aged Baby Bell. The same colour too if you get the Mars edition. Speaking of which, there are more options than a Sony camera menu, with the original Solar System selection seeing the addition of full moon limited editions, natural phenomenon-inspired variations, and a few featuring a little Yapper type dog. There's the Dow Jones, S&P, FTSE, and of course there's the Seiko 5 Sports, all financial constants that can be relied upon for stability and continuity across generations of investors. Where the Seiko 5 Sports really shines, however, is in the complete absence of any interaction with Wall Street. The 40mm stainless steel case and bracelet are also pretty shiny as well. For the same price as that malleable MoonSwatch, you get a watch made from a not made up material with an actual mechanical movement on a strap that didn't crawl right out of landfill. And it's not just good for the money, it's actually good. You'll forgo creature comforts like a sapphire crystal and on-the-fly adjustment, so backhanding rocks is best avoided and bracelet setup will have to be done fly adjacent, but still you'll get to enjoy the smooth 6 beats per second of the Calibre 4 R36 for a solid 41 hours if it's not being worn. It's also water resistant to 100 meters, and unlike many perhaps cheaper AliExpress options, that's below the water. You can wear this watch comfortably on your wrist, reassured that Seiko has made about $1 billion before it to get yours absolutely right. Unless you upgrade to a bezel model. For the basic bitch SRPE 51K1, however, you're streamlined with a high-quality execution of the basic fundamentals. Plus, there's the day of the week too, perfect for that twilight zone between Christmas and New Year's when all sense of time and space goes out the window. We are upping our game and budget now to see what awesome wrist accents we can get between £500 and £1,000, and I think you'll quickly see this is where things really start hotting up. In at 685 of the King's finest British pounds is the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander Automatic, a sub £1,000 fly in the Tudor savings jar. You want it, it's got it. Sapphire crystal, check. Made in Switzerland just enough to qualify for the hallowed dial text, check. Water resistant enough to be worn on the ground floor of the Gherkin once it's entirely succumbed to flooding, that's 150 metres worth, check. A 39mm stainless steel case finished like a straight A student 2/3 into the exam, with bells on. What shapes up the Sealander to be an absolute bargain no-brainer is its ability to deliver not just on paper, but in person as well. Dressed up to the nines in shiny metal and crisp print that does not disappoint from any angle. The hands and markers, for example, are faceted to the max and rich with a mix of finishes to make them not only clearly readable, but an absolute delight to look at as well. With 3 classic colours to choose from, black, white, and no, not blue, but green, its writing checks not even Tudor can Visa Cash App. If you're not familiar with the term JDM, it basically means, haha, we made the best thing for us and you can't have it. Long rued by Honda Type R enthusiasts, the JDM brigade can now be joined by would-be owners of the Citizen Silverleaf Lacquer collection, which is rather confusingly led by a blue-dialed watch. This twin pairing of blue and silver watches is made available for the Japanese domestic market only, although given enough motivation, it is possible to procure one elsewhere. And you'll want to, because at £735 a piece, it doesn't just take the fight to Seiko's pressage, it brings a nuclear arsenal with it. Set inside a stainless steel case exactly 38.2mm across, thank you Japan, is the choice of 2 dials created by, you guessed it, layering silver leaf with lacquer. The resulting combination, whether dressed up with a blue tint and radial gradient or in its raw silver form, is nothing short of spectacular, especially when considering the finely polished hands and markers breaking them up. Being from the same family as Miyota, the Citizen Calibre 9011 is virtually identical to the very well-made Miyota 9015, benefiting from 42 hours of power reserve, hacking a quick set date, and best of all, finding a home inside one of the best-looking watches from the Citizen brand. Japanese customers don't get away scot-free, however, being forced to endure the bizarre decision to fit a 19mm strap. So there's what you expect to get for £900, there's what's unreasonable to expect for £900, and then there's the Liudas Norkus regulator, which leaves you wondering if perhaps its namesake owner didn't quite get to grips with English currency when he moved to the UK from Lithuania. The immediate reaction to seeing this watch is for your wallet to shrink back up inside you, but despite looks straight from the wrist of Mark Zuckerberg, it really does only cost £900. Well, the first cost that much, and the future one's a little bit more, but still. Built on top of a Seagull ST3000, essentially a manually wound pocket watch movement in the style of the Unitas 6498, which nestles within a 6.2mm thick stainless steel case, is a dial array entirely hand-finished and plated in gold in the style of watchmakers that, at this budget, you can't even afford to think about. It's a regulator type watch, so the hours, minutes and seconds have been displaced like a sulfate solution of copper and magnesium, separated out into discrete regions throughout the dial. Each hand is allocated to a layer, with those layers braced by means of supporting components that have been doled up real pretty-like, hand polished to a brilliant shine and secured with equally shiny screws. As another little flair of the eccentric, the mainspring barrel gets gutted in front of everyone, the spring inside completely visible from beneath its securing bridge. A box crystal 5mm high caps this 3-dimensional creation for a total thickness of 11.2mm, making the many layers visible from a sidewards view as well. Since you're probably subscribed to like 1,000 YouTubers anyway, may as well add me to that list. Not only will it not affect you in any way, since YouTube doesn't seem to care if you're subscribed or not for some reason, it'll also make me a very happy boy. Thank you. Breaking into our £1,000 to £2,000 budget is the Nomos Club Campus at £1,300, a watch Nomos itself calls a robust all-rounder and a reliable life companion. Whilst it's unlikely to rub your feet and make you visit its parents, the Club Campus is definitely a solid little budget. And whilst it may not be the college-themed nighttime dance establishment we've all dreamed of, what it does do is represent just about the best of high-quality mid-range watchmaking at a price that barely borderlines entry. I could tell you all about the 36mm steel case, the sapphire crystal, 100m water resistance and 8.2mm thickness, but that's like describing a Wagyu fillet steak as a cube of cow carcass. Experiencing the Club Campus is to fully appreciate the lengths Nomos have gone to fill this watch with brilliance, an accomplishment in refinement that competes way above its price point. And that's even before introducing the hand-wound Alpha, a 43-hour caliber with impeccably executed finishing that's unfortunately hidden away behind a solid caseback. You can't win them all. Finding a chronograph rated to 100 meters is already like getting a waiter's attention when you want the bill, but to combine that with one of the cheapest prices you'll pay for a Swiss-made chronograph seems even less likely. Nobody told the Germans, however, because the Sinn 356 Pilot is exactly that, a 100-meter water-resistant watch with a Swiss-made chronograph for just £1,450. It's a rather pessimistic watch, however, because it's supposed to be a pilot's chronograph, and a pilot 100 meters below the ocean waves is a pilot that got it very, very wrong indeed. If you peep into the cabin of your next EasyJet flight and spy one of these on the captain's wrist, maybe wait for the next one, which, knowing EasyJet, is probably due by the time your booked flight actually leaves the ground anyway. In true Sinn style, the 356 Pilot looks like it could win a war all by itself, although it's probably just as well it can't. The incredibly legible dial sits beneath a domed sapphire crystal, laid out in a 12-9-6 arrangement thanks to the Sellita Calibre 500 doing duty in the engine room. Being a pilot's watch, it's also anti-magnetic, and for safety reasons is banned from having a beard. If you're cracking to pack as much complication in your wrist station as is conceivably possible for sub £2,000, however, then Farah's Cobb 3 is going to be difficult to beat. At first glance, it's tough to tell what on earth's going on exactly, a colourful mishmash of things that seem familiar but somehow aren't, set within a steel 41mm case. No, it's not a 1970s TV test card. It's a Monopusher chronograph GMT, the likes of which I don't think you've ever seen before, and it'll cost you just £5 shy of £2,000. Start, stop and reset of the manually wound 62-hour Sellita SW530 MMP are all done via the same pusher, sending the blue and orange hands a spinning until their task is complete. 10 minutes is highlighted on the 30-minute chronograph subdial as a reminder of how to cook the perfect boiled egg, with the yolk done to the same shade of yellow. Also in yellow is the GMT hand, coinciding with the outer 24-hour track split into day and night, with the transitional hours at 6 and 6, splitting the blue and orange hues. And bim, guess what? This chronograph will take you to 100 meters as well. If you see a pilot wearing this one, report them to the FAA immediately. You can rest assured if the captain of your bird is wearing the Airain Type 20, however, the first of our selection at £2,000 to £5,000, because a 50-meter water resistance inspires more confidence in their ability to get it up and keep it up for the entire duration. It's also a pilot's watch of a most historical nature, built to the specification of French military aviators in the 1950s by none other than Breguet, and also Airain. That's rarefied, pressurized air, because not only is Breguet's current Type 20 aviation chronograph a few front teeth short of stunning, it also costs enough to buy a share in an actual Cessna. If you like your aviation apparel under the price of the aircraft itself, then I suggest the Airain instead. It's 39mm across in a cockpit-resistant steel and benefits from the Calibre AM2 from Swiss movement maker AMT. Not heard of them either. That's Sellita's high-end arm, and despite being as well known as the fourth Hemsworth brother, is packing some pretty slick technicality into the Airain Type 20. One of the original directives for the watch was a need for a chronograph that can reset and restart whilst running with just a single push of the lower pusher. The AM2 delivers that for the Type 20 in a complication defined by two of the worst words to hear on a long-haul flight over halfway into its journey. flyback. It wasn't going to be a bargain list of value for money watches without a Tudor, but it may come as a surprise as to which, because whilst the Black Bay 58 delivers so much for such a relatively low price, the Black Bay Pro is dishing out more toppings for the dough. For less than £200 above the Black Bay 58, the Pro not only adds little pieces of Karamak bar to the dial to aid in nighttime reading, there's a whole other time zone to play with as well. Yes, unlike the original Explorer 2, with which this shares more DNA than the cast of Backdoor Babe 6, the Black Bay Pro, now with new context you can't unhear, allows the independent adjustment of its GMT hand. Leave that faded orange fella where it is though, and slide the local time hour hand to where you need it to be instead, because this is a true GMT and not a phony baloney cooler GMT that's, according to the internet, basically unusable. What's kind of nuts is that, as well as being, I think, the best looking watch in the Tudor lineup, it's also cheaper than the Black Bay 58 GMT. Yes, that watch proves the Pro could have been slimmer, but the fact is most people can handle more girth than they'd ever imagined possible. It seems quite bizarre to add a quartz watch at the peak of our mid-level collection, and to willingly give £4,000 to anyone for a battery-powered watch would ordinarily be met by intervention from a carer, but in this case, it's safe. It's more than safe. It's an absolute bargain. I was first introduced to Cartier watches by Dr. Fraser Crane of the TV show Cheers, who immediately imprinted upon me the type of person who wears a Cartier. Someone stuffy, rude, and pretentious. Exactly what I aspired to be. Also someone who later upgraded to a Patek Philippe and basically the model citizen for any Patek Philippe advertising campaign. Thierry Stern would indeed approve. It's kind of weird actually. Tudor has a price. Rolex has a price. Patek Philippe even has a price. But Cartier's just expensive. How expensive, no one really actually knows. Just expensive. And actually, some of the Cartier models that look the most expensive really aren't. The £4,000 large Santos-Dumont in quartz, with no second hand so you can't tell it's quartz, isn't what you'd call cheap, but it's far cheaper than anyone would assume. That's because it's not £4,000, it's expensive. I've been having an absolute blast chatting with my Patreons over at Patreon, and I want to say a big thank you to them for supporting my descent into madness. If you would like to join them, check out the link in the description. Thank you. To break the bank on our bargain-busting body clocks, we enter into the £5,000 to £10,000 bracket with the biggest no-brainer since heated seats. A watch I'm sure you won't be surprised to see on this list, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41. Not only is it perhaps a little cheaper than you might expect to see a Rolex at £5,650, it's also, in each and every way, the most watched that ever watched. Not only is it the watch all the other watches wish they could be when they grow up, it's also a Rolex, and that means something. What it means, I'm not entirely sure, but it's something. And it's enough thing to make £5,650 seem like great value for one. Here's a challenge for you. How cheap do you think you can get a Swiss-made Perpetual calendar for? I suppose you're thinking somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 because you're taking this question way too seriously and getting all competitive again. And I'd say you were right. Except you're not, because how on earth would it be possible to get a Swiss-made Perpetual calendar for less than £10,000? Perpetual calendars from brands no one even buys, like IWC and Jaeger-LeCoultre, cost twice as much, if not more. Well then blow me down, because this Frederique Constant Highlife is not only a Perpetual calendar, but an integrated sports watch Perpetual calendar as well, and as we all know, that usually adds a 10 times multiplier. Not here, because the Highlife, complete with self-correcting calendar all the way to the year 2100, retails at £7,995. It's not even got an annoying deficiency like an overly large case or a gluten intolerance. 41mm across, 12.65mm thick, and I'll remind you, a freaking Perpetual calendar. It even has 100 meters of water resistance, so you know whether it's a leap year or not when you're spearfishing for yellowtail. Everyone's dream of owning a Lange 1 very quickly slipped away the moment they realised not even a small mortgage would cover it, and so it was to watches more ordinary of dial that many disappointed customers directed their spending instead. That lingering hope of owning a watch designed on felt farm can be reawakened, however, because fellow Germans Glashütte Original have independently and entirely coincidentally arrived at exactly the same design. In front, the £9,700 PanoMaticLunar gives you all the good bits from Langer's No. 1. A big date, a moon phase, a font that seems angry somehow, and the same disregard for spatial efficiency as a cheap inkjet printer. In back, there's not just one hand-engraved swan neck regulator support, but two, because like a good sock, two is always better than one. That is, unless you're enjoying the rest of the beautifully finished Calibre 9002, of which there's only one, which even gets a solid gold weight on the rotor to make the most of that wrist action. It's 40mm, 12.7mm thick, looks incredible, and is so close to the Langer, it can smell its Hugo Boss. As we enter our final category of £10,000 and over, we say goodbye to Sense and Reason and hello to some of the nicest pieces of wristwear you could ever hope of slipping your fist through. But just because we've got a lot of wedge to pledge doesn't mean we should do so either willy or nilly, so we'll start our hypothetical expenditure without leaving the borders of Germany, with Kudoke for the utterly charming K2. Stefan Kudoke is a wizard with his fingers, crafting incredible skeletonized watches that look amazing, but not many people actually want to buy. So there's the K-series as well, but rather than suffering head gasket failure, they bring a flavour of Stefan's abilities to a more mainstream audience. The K2, for example, which adds a day-night indicator to the base K1, features hand engraving you'd expect to see on only the finest watchmaking, set into a beautifully frosted dial within a 39mm case. Back to back with it is a Calibre of Kudoke's own specification, finished in its standard form with frosting and hand engraving. But since Stefan's itching to put those fingers to good use, you can choose to have it fully engraved and skeletonized as well. And all this comes right at the bottom end of our infinite budget at £10,700. I suppose the devil does indeed make work for idle fingers. Imagine if a watch manufacturer decided not to just lazily revive a vintage model, but go back to the original plans and build it again from the ground up, including the highly complicated movement. There's not a brand on the planet that would be so daft as to spend all that money when they could just slap a Solita in it, dip the dial in coffee and call it a day. As we've seen earlier, however, the Swatch Group isn't always that not daft. So basically, Omega was given the go-ahead to remake the vintage Calibre on which the current MoonWatch is based, despite being almost identical to most ordinary people. Like, imagine if Porsche said, "F it, let's make an air-cooled engine as well for no real reason." It would be the greatest thing Porsche had made in decades. That's what the Calibre 321 is for Omega, and at first Omega only sold it in ridiculously expensive gold watches because I suppose it really needed to at least start to wash its own face, but now it's available in a £14,500 steel Speedmaster, and to me that seems pretty remarkable. That's basically the same price as a steel Daytona, which by comparison is about as exotic as a ham and cheese sandwich. There's something collectors of high-end watches, the highest end in fact, cherish above everything else: interior angles. No, that's not an instruction from an IKEA flat pack, it's the return of a beveled edge below 90 degrees in a sharp defined crease. The reason these are so prized is because these days a lot of the hand finishing work done on polished bevels can be automated, except because the drill bits used in the CNC machines are round, an interior angle still needs to be done entirely by hand. Well, for £19,800, the Armin Strom Gravity Equal Force has interior angles. Quite a few interior angles in fact. More interior angles than Keira Knightley's face. You'll see them in pairs on the inside edges of the dial side cocks, thick and hand polished. Now, I would guess that 98% of you watching have no interest in thick hand polished cocks at all, but for the cock curious 2% of you, you'll be pretty impressed you can get them for sub £20,000. And that's not even beginning to get into the remarkable constant force transmission and stop work declutch mechanism engineered into the Gravity Equal Force, which, even if you don't understand, sounds house levels of expensive. The only house you'll be getting in exchange for this particular Armin Strom, however, is one on wheels. And remember, if your credit card is searing the inside of your wallet, but you want to make sure you spend wisely on your watches, probably best just to get a different hobby. Something a bit more sensible, like juggling rattlesnakes, for example. See you next time.